All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are going on a very specific mission together. We're basically going to act as forensic accountants to decode those massive, totally unexpected production bills coming from modern enterprise AI. Look, if you've been working with large language models and intelligent agents lately, you already know that managing AI spend has suddenly become its own chaotic discipline. It's wild out there. So we're going to break down exactly where the money goes, literally line by line, so you can stop guessing and actually start optimizing.
Okay, let's dive into this. The scale of what we're dealing with here is honestly just staggering. The FinOps Foundation found that in just under a year, industry token consumption leaped from single-digit trillions to tens of trillions of tokens. I mean, the growth was so explosive that a vendor-neutral body called the Tokenomics Foundation had to be launched literally just to define open standards for the economics of AI. This is a massive wake-up call for the entire industry. AI cost is absolutely no longer just a subset of your standard cloud cost.
Now, to really understand why that is, we've got to dispel a pretty dangerous myth right out of the gate. The AI era, it does not behave like the cloud era. The cloud era metered instance hours and gigabytes. You could reserve them, you could right-size them, you could literally just switch your servers off at night. The AI era, though, meters tokens. Tokens are dynamic, they're priced asymmetrically between input and output, and most importantly, they cannot be reserved or simply switched off at night in any familiar way. The meter never, ever sleeps. Because of this fundamental shift in how compute is metered, we end up in this incredibly painful situation that is just perfectly captured by this quote from Paul Ranjan's Token Economics Manual. He says, "Yet most teams still discover their AI bill the way you discover a leak, after the water damage." Man, if that doesn't hit the nail on the head, it is a uniquely frustrating experience to look at this totally opaque provider invoice at the end of the month and have absolutely no idea what actions triggered that massive spike in costs. So how do we fix this? Well, we need a new mental model. We're going to use a brilliant framing analogy for the rest of this explainer, the restaurant check. Imagine you go out to a restaurant and you distinctly remember ordering a steak. But when the check arrives, you realize you're not just paying for the steak. You're paying for those 4 appetizers you grazed on, the corkage fee, a mandatory service charge, and some weird table fee you didn't even know existed. In the world of AI, the model thinking, the actual inference, is the steak. But there is a whole lot more quietly running up your tab. And this brilliantly illustrates what that restaurant bill actually looks like under the hood of your enterprise AI. You aren't just looking at model calls. You're actually dealing with a highly complex ecosystem composed of 9 distinct cost buckets, 3 different procurement channels ranging from direct model APIs to SaaS-embedded AI and self-hosted GPUs, and 1 giant structural blind spot where developer-led purchasing is happening without any native budget allocation. When we map this restaurant check directly onto your enterprise architecture, the reality really sets in. Yes, for sure, inference is the stake. It dominates the bill because it scales linearly with your traffic. But those other items on the receipt, those are exactly where your budget forecasts go quietly and disastrously wrong. Let's rapidly run through this checklist so you can see just how much you're being nickel and dimed here. Bucket 1, inference. Bucket 2, training and fine-tuning. Bucket 3, embeddings. Bucket 4, vector storage and retrieval infrastructure. Bucket 5, orchestration compute. Bucket 6, gateway and platform costs. Bucket 7, observability. Bucket 8, evaluation runs. And hey, remember, LLM as judge runs are themselves inference. And finally, bucket 9, human review. It's this overwhelming, interlocking system where inference is literally just one piece of a 9-piece puzzle. Okay, let's actually pause for a second. We have to talk about the absolute biggest budget killer in this entire ecosystem. The real culprit? It's what we call the rereading tax. The reality is that surprise enterprise bills rarely come from one single expensive API call. No way. They come from modern agent systems quietly hemorrhaging money because they are constantly paying to reread long prompts, chat histories, and tool schemas over and over and over again. Find the rereading, and you have found the money. To really wrap our heads around this rereading tax, we have to look at the context window. Don't think of the context window as just free computer memory. Think of it more like a giant physical whiteboard. Imagine you hire a consultant who can only think about what is currently written on the whiteboard right in front of them. The catch? The venue charges you to rewrite the entire board from scratch every single time the consultant speaks. Early in the meeting, writing on the board is cheap. But 2 hours in, when it's covered edge to edge, you are paying an absolute fortune just to rewrite the whole board for every single sentence. Let's move to the math and see how this builds because it gets worse. In a conversation or an agent loop,
Every turn resends and rebuilds the entire history. It doesn't scale linearly, it compounds quadratically. Let's say every turn adds 500 tokens. Turn 1 input is 500 tokens. By turn 10, your input is 5,000 tokens per call. By turn 40, your input is 20,000 tokens for that single call. When you add all that up, a 40-turn conversation actually hits over 410,000 cumulative tokens. That compounding is the quiet engine totally destroying your budget.
And that quadratic compounding brings us straight to the 3 cost regimes. You see, your budget isn't simply determined by the fact that you're using AI. It is entirely dictated by the shape of the workload regime you're deploying. We can classify these workloads into 3 distinct shapes: CHOT, RAG, which stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, and agents. If we compare these regimes directly, the differences in cost behavior are just night and day. A simple chatbot basically sips your budget. It's linear and highly predictable. RAG drinks your budget. It adds a retrieval tax, embedding costs, and honestly, if your chunking is sloppy, it can triple your spend instantly. But an agent? An agent completely runs the tap. An agent runs a continuous loop. Plan, call a tool, read the result, think, repeat. And every single iteration rereads that massive, ever-growing transcript exponentially. So the crucial point is that coding agents specifically are a massive, totally unique financial liability. They essentially stack 4 different bills onto your tab at exactly the same time. First, they require massive context, like entire code repositories. Second, they run incredibly long loops, making dozens or even hundreds of calls. Third, their tool outputs, like build logs or code diffs, are ridiculously verbose. And fourth, they often have costly hidden reasoning tokens turned on by default. A single session can easily exceed $7 before anyone even checks a FinOps dashboard. Surprise? Ultimately, to fix this whole shebang, we have to shift our perspective to value. Because let's be real, nobody's chief financial officer thinks in tokens. To truly manage this, we have to climb the maturity ladder. Raw token counting is just step 1. True optimization mastery means translating these highly technical infrastructure costs into actual business unit margins. We have to climb the ladder from cost per token to cost per request, up to cost per feature, and finally to cost per intelligent outcome, like the actual cost per resolved customer ticket or processed insurance claim. Which brings us to one final thought. The next time you look at your enterprise AI architecture, please don't just look at the list price of the model. Look at the loops, look at the logs, and ask yourself this one provocative question. How much is your system paying to reread what it already knows? If you can answer that, you are well on your way to mastering the economics of the AI era. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to go audit those 9 hidden buckets today. See you next time.